Your Humanities Half-hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafide Zandiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half-hour. I'm Catherine Perry. As we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the battles of Saipan and Tinian this month, June 2019, today we'll hear portions of the stories of two World War II veterans who returned to the Marianas on a veterans tour earlier this year. We caught up with them during their busy tour, and we apologize for the sound quality of our interview, but hope you will agree that their stories have been important to capture and to share.
My name is Kenneth Scooter Barclay, and during the war I was a radio operator here on Saipan. I landed on D-Day behind the Marine Division with the 27th Infantry Division. They hadn't got in very far, and we landed right behind them, and the Japanese were shelling us, and we were on the beach trying to dig a foxhole. Very difficult to dig a foxhole in sand. It just falls back in. Then the next day we moved further inland, and the Japanese had predetermined where they could fire the mortars, so we did get some mortar rounds in our area, but we had a few casualties, but not very many. We continued to move on in, and I had some very interesting experiences. We cut off the peninsula, and I'm not sure what they call it, but it was beyond the airfield, and we could look over Magician Bay. For some reason, they had all the officers and all the non-commissioned officers go back to a meeting at battalion headquarters, and I operated the radio. They said to put out our aircraft identification panels. When we did that, there was a Japanese gun in a cliffs across Magician Bay that started firing on us. So we took and obviously took the panels down, and we had a thing called JANSCO, Joint Army-Navy Ship Control, and we had an overlay of the whole island so that you could pinpoint certain things. So I got on the radio, I called JANSCO, I was the radio operator, so I called JANSCO and told them that we'd been fired on, and they said, well, wait a minute, we'll get you some fire. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, around on the head of Magician Bay was a battleship and a cruiser. And they said, well, tell where it comes from. And I said, well, and meanwhile, they looked up on the road beyond the bay, on the top of the hill, and saw some Japanese soldiers and blasted them away. And so I was trying to pinpoint where to fire. And they didn't, either my instructions or their ability to follow them didn't work very well, but the Japanese gun didn't know that they were out there, and it came out and fired around. When it did that, a battleship saw it and they started firing. They literally obliterated that gun. And about a week later, I was able to get around on that side of Magician Bay. We weren't doing anything, so I climbed down the edge of the hill, looked in there, and the gun, they literally had eaten away about 12 foot of the cliff. Their gun was broken in half, and there were several dead Japanese around the gun. And I thought that was pretty interesting, knowing that I had indirectly caused that. While we were sitting there, the Marines were kind of wild, and they would go off on their own. And there was a Marine tank down below, just wandering around. And it was firing at things, and over hundreds of years, the water had washed around and created a kind of a pinnacle stuck up out of the ocean. And there was a grass shack in front of this pinnacle, and the Marine tank fired around at the grass shank, and that whole pinnacle blew up, just bang. And it was like an atomic explosion. The cloud went up about 6,000 feet with a big head, just like we saw later on in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And obviously the tank guy had a big story to tell when he got home, how he blew up the mountain.
Did you have any encounters with any civilians?
You know, I don't ever remember having any encounters with civilians at that point. Later on, towards the end of the battle, when we got all the way up in the northern end of the island, I did see there was a cliff at the ocean. I saw women throw their children over the cliff. I saw women jump off the cliff with children, and it was a pretty terrifying thing. So I had that kind of an encounter. I don't really remember seeing them otherwise. They sort of were afraid of the Americans and thought we were going to kill them, and so whenever they saw us around, they hid out. I was on Okinawa when the war ended. There was a different kind of a war there. When we got up on the northern end of Saipan, we were up on the ridge, and down below, the Japanese had a banzai attack against the 106th Regiment, and they went about 1,000 yards through the lines back to the artillery. The next day, they were coming back, and I was a radio operator, but I had an assistant, and he had my M1 that I had zeroed in before at 6 clicks of elevation. And we could look down, and you couldn't dig a foxhole, but you dug a slit trench and put the rock around it a little bit. And we could look down in and see that as they were coming back, there was a Japanese in one of these little trenches, and we could see the sun glinting on his helmet. So I said, "You take my field glasses," because I always carried field glasses. I would find a dead mortarman and take his field glasses. I said, "You take the field glasses and let's see if we can shoot at that guy." So we started firing rounds and whatnot and adjusting. And ultimately we reached, and it was very calm. It wasn't windy at all that day, no wind at all. So ultimately we reached a point where my shot hit the dirt or debris around the hole, and you could see it striking the bullet. You said, "Well, you're right there." So I would fire, and the guy would come up, look around, and then go back down. And I fired probably 3 or 4 shots. And each time he would wait a while and come up. The last time, the guy that with my field glasses said, "I think you got him." He never did come up again. Now, I can't promise that I did get him, but we figured out that it was 800 yards. The number.
Is that far? That's pretty far.
Very far. But I went from 6 clicks of elevation to 28 clicks of elevation. So that really raised my body. So it was pretty interesting.
You're part of the greatest generation
I am.
of America. From your perspective, what is it you would like the generations that have come after you, including myself?
Well, I think from my perspective that every American in the United States was behind our government and behind our soldiers. It isn't like that today. We have a very fractured and divided country. We have people, I happen to be very conservative, but we have people on the other side that have no real love of our country. And 5 years ago they were for something when Obama was in power. Now the same thing, they were totally against it just because they had a change in administration. And our country is, I think, worse off because of it. That we don't have that kind of love of country and love of soldier, and like I said, everybody, man, woman, and child. Women went to work in the factories where they had never worked before. We had rationing, and you couldn't buy tires and all kinds of things, but everything was pointed towards making our country successful. And today I think there are a lot of people who don't love our country and they don't care. That's an opinion, but so I think we were the greatest generation, and I'm proud of it. I appreciate your letting me tell my story. My stories are sometimes kind of strange, but I did have some good experiences. I will never forget the women jumping off the cliff on the north end of the island. It was so tragic. I have great sympathy for the people that were on the various islands that we fought for, like Macon. I was at Macon, I was at Saipan, and I was at Okinawa. And the people that lived there had to put up with an awful lot. And I did not think that I could. I grew up as an Episcopalian. I went to church. 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. I was not sure that I could kill somebody. I had made friends with a person that lived near me. My hometown was Spokane, Washington. And on Macon, he kind of went back. It wasn't jungle, but it was very thick foliage. Went back in there, and when we came out, they had left him behind. The Japanese took a bayonet and ripped him open from his groin to his neck. From that time on, I had no feeling, and I did kill a lot of Japanese. It's not something that you're proud of, but it's something that you do in war. I just came from a meeting at Iwo Jima, and there was the Marines fought at Iwo Jima. There was a battalion commander who, after the war, stayed in long enough to become a lieutenant general, and he went to Japan. He realized that the soldier down at the bottom was there because the country told him there. And he realized that the same thing was true on our side. So we get together once a year, have for about 10 or 15 years, and they get on one side, all the monuments are in between, we get on the other side. They have a band that is half Japanese and half American. They have singers. The Americans sang Amazing Grace, and I don't know what the Japanese singer sang, but she hit every note known to man. She went all the way up, down, and so I got to go to that. I've been to that twice, and it was a very significant honor. The Mount Iwo Jima was really a horrible battle. More Americans got killed there, I think, than Japanese, because they fought a long time. The only Japanese that either didn't get into the caves and die or get killed were, I think, 16 got evacuated by our medical personnel in our channels, and so they stayed alive. I might end this with one very terrible experience. Was on Saipan. The Japanese, we started bombing it 5 months before, burned off all the sugar cane and everything. The Japanese, when you took a position, you never saw a dead Japanese except for the ones you killed right then. But they took, beginning 5 months before, they hauled all these bodies and put them in an area, and they didn't bury them, and I have no idea why. But my company got the job of going in and burying 5,000 dead Japanese. Some as old as 5 months, some within a month or 2 weeks or a week. When we first went in there was not a man that didn't just vomit. you remember a few good things in the war, but most everything is bad. I wish we could cut out wars. We don't seem to. That was a different war. Today, they'll say that we had 10 or 12 casualties in Afghanistan or wherever it is. When the Marines went to Tarawa, they had over 1,000 killed and over 3,000 wounded in 5 days. Hopefully we will not have another war, because if an atomic bomb ever goes off and we start shooting them at each other, our world will be gone.
This is your Humanities Half Hour. We've been listening to the story of Kenneth Scooter Barclay, a World War II veteran. We'll be back with more after this break.
The Northern Marianas Humanities Council invites you to the 75th anniversaries of the Battles of Saipan and Tinian multimedia exhibit from June 12 to July 14, featuring never-before-seen photos and footage of the people of the Marianas during the battles in 1944. Photos will be exhibited at the Northern Mariana Islands Museum of History and Culture, and footage will be screened at the American Memorial Park. Join us in commemorating the resiliency of the Marianas peoples at this historic exhibit from June 12 to July 14.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half Hour. This half of the show, we are listening in on an interview with World War II veteran Dean Ladd.
We landed right about where what used to be the old Marianas High School, down there, not very far from Sisupi, a little bit, well, probably a mile north of Sisupi, and we drifted up too far, so we had to kind of move back down a little bit, and so we ended up starting right about Sisupi and then heading up San Vicente through, and then up the mountain, up through the west side of the mountain, and where it comes to another little hill. We went up that valley. So the Tapachao is the dividing line between my division, 2nd Division, and the 4th Division on the other side. And then beyond that was the Army. Now, I had a very close call. Going up that valley, they were looking down, the Japanese looking down our throats. Now we got to the top, now we're looking down their throat, just starting to go down to Tanapeg Harbor. I was under a big tree. I didn't know there's not many around like that anymore. And three of our own 155 millimeter rounds were called in short. Hit us, and we had 50 casualties like that. I was under this big tree. One of the rounds hit the top of the tree and exploded every direction. Otherwise, I would have been pulverized. I got a piece of shrapnel through here, just a flesh wound. I spent 2 days back in the aid station. But anyway, when I, at that point where that happened, today as we just drove, there's a condominium in that exact spot. And there's a big water tank right nearby. I remember when I was there looking for it, I climbed up to the top of the tank and I got stung by a hornet on the top of the tank. So anyway, you go to the internet and here's this condominium is at the same location. As I came by, the guy said, yeah, it's up there, all right. So then right after that, we the bonsai. See, I got hit on 6th of July. Yeah, right. I think it was 6th of July. And the bonsai was just shortly after that, about a day or two after that. And so then I was company commander at that time. And what we had to do was mop up any leftovers. And we killed, each company killed maybe 100 or so. Most of them didn't fight back. They were just hiding in the brush and all that. The Japanese coming down. And so then, so we were burying all these bodies. We pulled over thousands of bodies over into a trench, about 4 feet deep, just inland from the main road that goes up through San Roque today. I went back to get my arm redressed. I ended up walking right through where that night 40 more were killed as they attempted another bonsai on our battalion CP. Well, I found out that that's where Captain Sakai Oba's people were. He was up just a little bit further towards the hill, and this road goes over what used to be called Calavera Pass. And there's apparently not a road cross there anymore, I don't think. But anyway, that's where he was. So when I found that out, I went to Japan and interviewed him. We became close friends afterward. Yeah. So anyway, it says, you the guys yelling at bonsai? I said, no, it wasn't me. It's one of the other officers doing that. So anyway, I had walked right through his men. That night, 40 more were killed. I had walked through them all. They didn't want to give away their position because they were going to attack us at night from that position.
Did you encounter any civilians?
No, I didn't. But of course, many ended up in the camp down there. And of course, Ova, he wouldn't come out, and he wouldn't come out of the mountain until the war was over, and then it wouldn't come out until a senior man to him told him, yeah, it's over. On Tinian, we landed right shortly after the unit just ahead of us on that little 200-yard long beach, and then headed north, and very, very close to where they later on loaded the Enola Gay was loaded. And then we went the whole length of the island right straight south and had to take that last ridge. We were very concerned. At that time, my company commander got heavy shell through his knee area, and I became the company commander. And he ended up in the hospital in Guadacanal, but he had been a professional dancer, and so he didn't want to live. There's a book called "We Came to Win or Die." It just came out. A guy by the name of Elrod, and this my company commander was his best friend. What happened? So then when I was now I'm the company commander, and we had to take this ridge. And the battalion commander says, Dean, we got to take that ridge because the enemy will get it and they'll make their bonsai from us at that point. Well, when we got there, oh my gosh, we're going to have a heck of a time taking that ridge. It turned out there's a winding road that goes up the ridge. It's not there anymore. The company to my left went up it with no resistance. I followed them. We got up there. That night, the Japanese were all around us. My radio operator in the hole with me, he was killed. The company commander of the unit, Jason, a friend of mine, his radio operator was killed. It was hole with him. And there was one of our anti-tank guns about 75 feet away, firing canister. You know what canister is? Like shot, and that's used against personnel rather than tanks. You see. So anyway, the Japanese killed most of the crew, but that gun was very damaging. Made me attack it. But that was a very scary night. Then the next day, we got to the cliff, looking down down to the ocean. Off to our left, but it could have been three or 400 Japanese soldiers, something like that, and they would not surrender. They were out there in the point. It used to be called Marpo Point. I think it's still that same name on this map. Well, anyway, they're out there. We a boat went out with a bullhorn and gave them an ultimatum to surrender by a certain time, or they were going to be fired at. They wouldn't surrender. We fired our machine guns and mortars at them, and they all jumped to their death off of that point known as Marpo Point. Now, when we were down there yesterday, we were at where the civilians jumped off, suicide cliff, and from looking from that point back, that picture, looking back at where my company was all strung on the top of that ridge, and that was the last resistance, August 2nd. The island was secured at that point. I joined the Marine Corps, enlisted when I was 18 years old, the Organized Reserve. At that time, Marine Corps was only 20,000. Only 20,000. During the war, it grew to 500,000. So you can imagine what happened. So I went from a buck private to a captain in a matter of 3 years. Imagine that. Right after Pearl Harbor, we were in San Diego, and immediately within about a week and a half, we were aboard ship heading to American Samoa. We spent 8 months there because we were in great danger. The Japanese going to capture that and block our supply line to New Zealand and Australia. Then what happened was the Battle of Midway. It completely changed it. Now we trained the Samoans to defend themselves, and then we went to Guadalcanal, and we were in the last 3 months of the fighting on Guadalcanal. And a number of very close calls I had. As an example, we were on the flank moving forward, kind of like a spearhead for the army coming through, and there was a sniper shooting at us, but normally they're just harassing, not doing any damage. And this guy comes up, one officer comes, I don't know who it was, says, "Don't be scared, they don't hit you." And all of a sudden he got his shoulder. And I thought to myself, boy, he deserved it. Well, anyway, then I laid down in the tall grass, and I spotted the sniper's leg up there. And about that time, that sniper realized I saw him. He shot at me, knocked the dirt in my face. That close, getting hit in the face. So anyway, I emptied my magazine into him. That was a close call. The other close call was I was leading my platoon up a ridge, and there was a strong point up there, and the Japanese shooting at us, and we could not get to it. Didn't know exactly where that hole was. And so then the fellow on this side of me, one of my men, said, "Oh, I see him." And he threw a hand grenade, and just that, he got hit in the neck, was killed instantly. And then the squad leader on the other side of me, all of a sudden his rifle wouldn't shoot anymore. A round went, here he was, shooting, and it went right through the magazine. All the bullets dropped out, and he says, "I'll be a dirty name. I'll be a dirty name." So then, that was a very close call, very close. So I said, "Hey, everybody's shooting, Hey, hold the fire! You don't know what you're shooting at." You stop. We're almost out of ammunition. Hey, we gotta send up some more ammunition. So here, all of a sudden, bandoliers full of ammunition kept coming up, just like same as Guadacanal, guys. Anyway, we were lucky to survive that one, I'll tell you. So from that point on, that was in mid-November. The Japanese made a major attack to try to recapture. That was the big naval battle of Guadalcanal, mid-November. That's where the Sullivan brothers were all killed. Their 5 brothers went down at the same time. Of course, the major one is we were in New Zealand, got replacements, so on. I recovered. I got badly shot up on Tarawa. Next, we left the last part of October and didn't know where we were going. Ended up to be Tarawa, right on the equator and the international date line. And we knew that the tide was going to be real iffy. We were going to get over that reef. What happened was that the Japanese artillery started shooting at our transports. Transports had to move further out of range, and we do that. We were delayed getting here. Now the tide had dropped. We couldn't get over the reef, so we had to wade 600 yards to the beach through heavy machine gun fire. I got shot through here, within my bladder, exited a quarter of an inch from my spinal nerve. And the only reason I survived was there's about 15 of us were dragged over to the landing boat over here. And Eddie Albert, you heard of Eddie Albert, the movie actor? You ever heard of Green Acres? Okay, he was in that. But anyway, he saved my life. 15 of us were out there wounded. We were going to drown. We were dragged over the landing boat, and if that hadn't been there, Eddie Albert, see, it was there, I would have died right there. Instead, I got back out to the troop transport and was operated on an hour after I was hit. I was dying of shock. The surgeon had been an abdominal specialist at Mayo Clinic. Can you imagine that? That's about it. There's just so many close calls.
If you'd like to hear more of Dean Ladd's war recollections, he has published 2 books under the title Faithful Warriors. The first is Faithful Warriors, the 2nd Marine Division in the Pacific, and the second is Faithful Warriors, A Combat Marine Remembers the Pacific War. And you can find either of those publications on Amazon.com. We've been listening to interviews conducted in March 2019 with Kenneth Barclay and Dean Ladd, 2 World War II veterans who saw action in the Marianas. I'd like to thank Executive Director Donnie Edwards of Best Defense Foundation and Gordon Marciano of Pacific Development, Inc. for helping to facilitate these interviews. And most especially, I'd like to thank Mr. Ladd, Mr. Barclay, and the other veterans we've spoken with for sharing their stories with us and for their service. Let us continue to remember our past here in the Marianas, even as we navigate our course into the future. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.